actually on that note, let's get to the experts. I mean, GST is absolutely dominating headlines this morning. And we have two subject matter experts now joining in to talk about what this could really mean. We have Najib Shah, former chairman of the Central Board of Excise and Customs, as well as Pratik Jain, who is partner at Pricewaterhouse. And of course, he looks at indirect taxation very, very closely. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in. Mr. Shah, if I could start with you. I mean, it really is a bonanza when perhaps there were not such big expectations. The slabs being moved down from 4 to 2 and having that 40% sin rate. Do you think it will do the job? There is going to be some revenue loss, and we still need to see what shape and form that arrangement is going to take between centre and states. But do you see this being revenue neutral, or will there be a significant revenue loss? And if yes, will it be worth it to stimulate the economy?
Yes, to answer you precisely, yes, it'll be worth it. This is something which everybody had been asking for, hoping for, perhaps not as dramatically as it happened. Announcement from the ramparts of the Red Fort and so swiftly thereafter. So there's something which is good. It should stimulate demand in the economy. There will be a revenue loss for the states and the centre. Estimates vary from whatever, 85,000 to 1.5 lakh crores. And that will be something which will be a matter of concern for states. I think the GST Council's meeting will have to necessarily address the concerns of the states. And I have always held perhaps that some degree of hand-holding may be required and necessary. The government also will be closely looking at ensuring that the rate cuts translate into price cuts and are passed on to the consumers, because having taken this audacious, bold step in reducing the slabs, they would necessarily expect benefit to pass on to the consumers.
All right. How much would the impact, as per your assessment, given the data that we have so far, be on revenue, sir? We just want to understand, because the government also has to make this revenue neutral, right? Or maybe have the least impact on the fisc. Pratik, if you could do, some maths on that.
So look, there is a revenue impact, as Mr. Shah said. Of course, the estimates vary. One is hearing about 1 lakh crore as an impact. But, in indirect tax, what happens is that when the rate goes down, it increases the consumption. And therefore, to some extent, the impact of revenue loss is neutralized. So that's one point. Second is, obviously, it will reduce the classification issues and disputes, etc., for the government. If you see, before GST came in, our revenue neutral rate, when it came in, revenue neutral rate was supposed to be around 15%. We have, before the rate cuts, around 11.5%. After the rate cuts, it could be around 10%. Now, at 10%, India would be placed at any other, compared to any other developed or developing economies in the world. And that's a very, very moderate rate to my mind. So there will be an impact. But in the long run, what we have seen with GST and earlier as well, that when you reduce the tax rate, the tax base increases. So hopefully, over a period of 1 or 2 years, you will see actually the tax base increasing further, and the revenue loss to a large extent will be neutralized.
Gentlemen, morning. Great to have both of you here. Pratik, if you can talk some specifics, and we'll sort of go zoom into specific sectors and zoom out as well and look at the bigger picture. But cars, for example, right? And it's been keenly awaited. Luxury cars over 1200 cc over a certain length now will attract 40%. The rate goes up from 28 to 40, but they were the rate was already 40, right? Plus cess. So how does this work? And the cess gets subsumed?
Yes. So what we're hearing is, so obviously there was a rate with GST around 28% plus cess, and depending on the length of the vehicle and so on. In the smaller car, the cess was either not there or very small, right? So 28% there for the smaller cars. For petrol, likely to move to 18%, and diesel likely to again from 31% to 18%. So that's a big one. For bigger cars, there are two possibilities. One is that government might continue with cess in some form, right? Yesterday there was some discussion about is it a national calamity contingent duty, which is going to replace cess. We have requested the government that it perhaps makes sense to replace cess and increase the GST rates per se. So if GST rates increases, then it could be 40% for bigger cars, but it will be still lesser, largely, than what you have today. But if they want to impose another cess or kind of a tax in lieu of cess, then more or less the tax incidence could be same as you have today, but it will not be worse off. So what I'm saying is that smaller cars will definitely get benefited from the looks of it. The bigger cars, either the incidence should go down slightly or should continue at the same level that you have today.
So, Pratik, hi, morning. I don't even know if it's possible to model this or not. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Shah as well. But with the changes and the proposal, as we know, in its current form, including things like, for footwear, the threshold might be hiked to now for hotel rooms, it's 7,500. For footwear and apparel, 2,500. Everything below these thresholds will be at 5%. Is there any way of modeling what the demand impetus could be? Pratik, I don't even know how one can kind of come to any sort of assessment, even category by category. Would you have anything on this?
No, look, for the bigger products, I think it's easier to simulate, right? So for auto, you can simulate that, okay, this many vehicles have been sold with the price elasticity and vehicle prices going down by 1.5 lakh. This will increase by so much. Similarly, you can do for air conditioners, some of the other consumer durables and so on. I think it's more difficult in a normal FMCG products like fruit juices and stuff like that. How do you really...
Okay, so let's talk ACs. ACs are basically durables and autos, the bigger ticket items. With the current changes being proposed, which is basically a 10% reduction in indirect taxation, 28% moves to 18%, which is big. By how much would you expect overall demand to be boosted up by? ACs and autos.
I will not take a guess on that. I'll say that it should be a substantial jump, right? It'll also, for air conditioner, also depends as to how the weather behaves and so on.
Sure.
But it should be substantial, right? I mean, 10% cut on vehicles, etc., translates into maybe 1.5 lakh or thereabouts, right? On the price itself.
Take your point. Take your point. It's difficult to put a number to it, but it should be substantial. Take your point.
Then there is the tertiary impact or the secondary impact of perhaps lower rates on insurance and auto parts, etc. as well. I'm not sure.
No, absolutely. On insurance, and which brings me to the larger question of this whole input tax credit business. And Mr. Shah, if you could weigh in on this, many industries are saying keep us in the higher rate bracket, but don't take away our ITC. Insurers have been sort of asking for that. So how should we wrap our heads around this business of the 5% bracket not having ITC? Or would you expect some change there? Maybe offer input tax credit to some degree, even in the 5% bracket, because that's going to be a very large slab now.
It's a classic case of too much of a good thing. Nobody expected this sort of reduction in rates. And this having come, this is going to be a natural corollary is this accumulation of credit. Because it is extremely difficult to ensure that all the inputs which go in the manufacture of a final product are taxed in such a way that they neutralize the rate in the final product. So it's going to be very challenging. There are going to be concerns. I think there are going to be teething concerns, definitely. And the government will have to tweak as we go along and look at those rates. What can be ensured procedurally is to try and ensure that wherever there's any accumulation of credit, to have ways and means of ensuring that the industry is able to access that credit in whatever manner, right? So those are procedural issues which can be looked at to alleviate the concerns of input tax credit accumulation, which is bound to happen in the current scenario.
All right. Thank you so much for joining in and giving us your views on what may the impact be. We'll obviously wait by for the actual document that comes on September 4th and thereafter assess the impact once we have more clarity. Yes.
Maybe I'll just ask Pratik. Pratik, from what we've reported, you think anything kind of stands out to you which perhaps is a problem in the council? Or you think this is all what has been reported already? I thought largely on expected lines.
Largely on expected lines. I'll just say that what happens to the compensation cess? I think that's a big issue because the cess is there in the distribution chain, right? So if I bought a vehicle as a dealer, I paid cess. Now, suddenly when tomorrow I have to bill, there is no cess. So what happens to the cess, which is there with me in my books? Will that be allowed as a refund or not? That's number one. Second is anti-profiteering. What are the guidelines which will come as to how do I pass it on to the customer? And how do I manage the transition stock, right? My stock is lying with dealers, with wholesalers, with retailers. So how do I manage that? How do I do stickering and so on? So some bit of guidance from that, from GST Council is expected. But
and on ITC, and also very quickly, if you could weigh in on this whole ITC dilemma, I mean, how can it perhaps best be handled and the transition be sort of smoothened out?
So on the transition, what they could do perhaps is to say that I can make an adjustment as an OEM, so as a company, and do a credit note to the dealers to the extent of tax amount. So I adjust the tax amount, I claim as a refund, and ITC for the dealer is reduced to that extent. So let's say a dealer has purchased something at 12%, he gets a credit note of 7% from the manufacturer. Something of that sort can come in, because if not, then obviously there will be commercial negotiation then in that case, because they will want some compensation for the incremental ITC which they're going to carry in their books for some time. So then there'll be additional discounts, etc., which will have to be offered by the manufacturers to the dealers and retailers.
All right. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes. As our guests earlier said as well, the devil will obviously be in the details. But two things are clear. If there is more money in the hands of people, irrespective of what the rates are, they are going to spend it somewhere. So consumer discretionary, just look at Trent, value fashion retailer, up around 3% right now. Again, this is a stock which has been an underperformer in the past. From its peak, it has seen a bit of a decline. 20-25% growth is what the company is guided for sustainably. This month, it's done well. And the second one is Yatra Online. That's up around 5% as well. Avenue Supermarts is the other one, which is up around 1.5%. So you have more money in the hands of people. People will spend it on travel, fashion, and perhaps some of the important groceries.
And let's not forget footwear. Relaxo is hardly relaxed this morning. A stock that Banglam had picked out. Now it's up 8%. Relaxo on the hopes that footwear below 2,500 rupees was going to be taxed at just 5% now. So there you see the GST chartbusters playing out on the screen. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining in on that conversation. Very, very helpful and filled with perspective. We do have to take